But first, coffee. What was that? Hello and no. Hello and hello. Falsely acute. What's your best friend's name? Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Heather, and as always, I'm reading with a vengeance, and I hope you are too. I hope everybody's reading is doing very well. If you're new to my channel, very warm welcome to you. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for your support. Today, I'm here to talk to you about my 5 favorite books for the third quarter of the year. So those are books that I read in July, August, and September. I'm a little late with this recording, but here I am. This is one of my favorite videos to record. I love going back and looking through the books that I've read and picking out the ones that were absolute favorites. Most of the time, I have a really difficult time doing that because I read so many books that there are too many to choose from. I always like to have top 5 favorites for the quarter. So I always find myself having to cut absolute bangers just to get to the really, really good ones that I absolutely love to share with you. This time, for this quarter, I had a hard time for very different reasons. Now, don't get me wrong, the 5 books that I'm going to talk to you about in this video, I really, really enjoyed. Only one of them were 5-star. There's a second one that the more I think about it, the more it could be a 5-star. And then the other 3, I really, really, really liked, but weren't 5-star. The other crazy thing about this list is that one of these books I read back in August. The other 4 I read way back in July. So that tells you something about my reading month in September. Not great. But anyways, without further ado, here I am to talk to you about my 5 favorite books of the third quarter of the year. First book I'm going to talk to you about is The Butcher by Jennifer Hillier. This is not the first time that Miss Hillier has been featured on my top 5s list. I really, really love her writing, and I really, really look forward to getting through the rest of her backlist. The Butcher follows a young man named Matt. He is an up-and-coming chef. He is very, very successful running his own restaurant. Matt was raised by his grandparents because I can't remember what happened to his parents, but something happened to his parents, and he was raised by his grandparents, and his grandfather, who is the only surviving one, he happens to be a legend of the town because he's a retired police chief who happened to apprehend and I believe shoot and kill a serial killer known as the Butcher back in the 80s. But now currently he is going to go live in kind of a retirement community. He's reached that time, his house is too big, and he leaves his house to Matt, who is very, very excited to move into this house. Once Matt moves into the house and starts cleaning things up, he finds a box down in the basement that has some things that could ruin his and his grandfather's lives. It's a pretty big secret. It's a pretty big reveal as far as the plot goes. And it happens like in the first couple of chapters. It happens early on. You find out kind of a big thing. I'm not going to tell you, even though it really wouldn't be a spoiler, but it kind of would be, because I think it's better if you read it for yourself. Because I remember gasping, like a twist that happens that early in a book, I gasped. So he finds this thing. Meanwhile, Matt's girlfriend, Sam, is obsessed with the Butcher because she believes that her mother was murdered by the Butcher, even though the Butcher was killed 2 years before her mother was. And she is doing a lot of research, and she wants to write a book about the Butcher. And now bodies start showing up that make Sam believe even more that the Butcher is still alive and is still out there. This book has all the thrills and chills you want in a thriller. People are not who they seem. The good guys aren't necessarily good guys. The bad guys aren't necessarily bad guys. And there is a complexity where there are just shades of gray throughout. This goes into, how far will you go to protect your family? How far will you go to protect the secrets of your family? Are homicidal tendencies generational? Do they float down in the genes? Who knows? this book addresses it in the most delicious ways. I enjoyed the shit out of this book. Jennifer Hillier is a master at thriller storytelling. This will not be the last Jennifer Hillier that I read. Next up on the list is William by Mason Coyle. And I just recently found out that Mason Coyle is a pseudonym. I can't remember the name of the actual author, Andrew something or other, I think. Anyways, William is a horror novel. Now, I started reading my horror novels for spooky season in August because as far as I'm concerned, August is kind of the very beginning of spooky season. So I read some horror novels. So there are 2 horror novels on this list. This one, William, was one of my favorites. This was genius. It had me going. This one follows Henry, and he is a genius robotics engineer, and he is also agoraphobic. So he has his lab in kind of the attic of his home, a home he shares with his pregnant wife, Lily, who also happens to be an engineer. And of course, since they're both engineers and Henry specifically is a robotics engineer, the house is kind of a smart house. The security and just automated things that you can have in a house. This house is like top of the line, state of the art, all the good stuff. Henry's current project is an independent AI capable of creative thought, and it is currently inside kind of a legless robot. He's not really complete, and his name is William. But Henry hasn't revealed William to anybody, not even Lily. Then one day, Lily invites some coworkers over, Paige and Davis, I believe are their names, over for dinner. And Henry sees something going on between Davis and Lily that kind of sends him into a little bit of a jealousy fit. So he wants to impress everybody, specifically Lily. And so he shows William to everybody when they come over. And then William gets out, and then stuff starts to go wrong. And William ultimately traps everybody in this house because he hooks up to the house and he's able to control entrances and exits and the phones, the faucet systems. There's a scene in a shower. If you know, you know. It was terrifying. And then there is a absolutely delicious twist that I did not see coming that just made this book even more brilliant, more terrifying. One of the best twists I have read in a horror novel. So good. This book was unhinged. If you are in the market for unhinged, this is the one for you. And the other horror book that is on this list, and I would say it's more of a thriller, is Nightwatching by Tracy Sierra. This book took me by surprise, and I almost was annoyed with it. I talked about this in a previous review because a lot happens in the first couple of chapters. Like in the first few pages, a lot happens, and it makes you wonder what else is there to happen in the rest of the 300 pages of the book. But don't be fooled. A lot happens, and there's a lot going on. So this book opens up with the main character. None of the characters are named, I don't believe, which I think adds to the isolation feeling of it. It's a mother of 2 young children, both under the age of 10. They're in a somewhat isolated house. It's a blizzard. Her husband's not home. She is in this house. She's tucked her kids into bed, and just as she's getting into bed, she realizes there's an intruder in the house. She goes, she gets her kids, and she hides them and herself in this little cubby hole, like I think is under the stairs. You don't know it's there. You can't possibly find it unless you already know it's there. So she's hidden in there with her kids, but she can see through like the cracks what this intruder is doing. And then the more she watches the intruder, the more she realizes that she recognizes him, but she can't quite pinpoint where she recognizes this guy from. We have in the first half of the book, this woman and just her terror, and not only her own terror and trying to stay quiet and hide and figure out what she's going to do, if she's going to wait it out for this intruder to realize they're not home and leave, or try to escape, but she's also trying to keep these 2 young children from A, making a noise, and B, from being so traumatized that they're going to be affected for the rest of their lives. And she realizes that the only way that she can get out of this is to leave her children there to be quiet and then try to get to a neighbor to call for help. And so halfway through the book, the whole intruder in the house is kind of resolved, but then a bigger storyline emerges. The story is told in kind of dual timelines as the main character is dealing with what she's dealing with in the present time. She's also flashing back to things that happened to her in her past. There's something that happened to her husband that she is still dealing with. She has a fractious relationship with her father-in-law. We have gaslighting that is going on from the police. She gaslights herself as far as thinking that a lot of what has happened to her is her own fault. This book deals a lot with past trauma and how it affects your day-to-day decisions, how the perceptions that women have of perceived danger and distress can be dismissed by society and how harmful that can be. This book is written in a way, though, that the reader also questions the main character. And I think that's by design. I think it's brilliant to really feel like you have been the bad guy before. So it really puts a spotlight on that phenomenon, and it really makes you understand it a little bit more. I thought this was well written. I thought the themes were handled deftly, and I felt that the ending was extremely satisfying. I actually gasped. If you're like me and you're an overthinker and you start reading it and you're like, what else can go on for the next 200 to 300 pages? Stick with it. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. Next book on this list is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. This one follows Elwood in 1960s Tallahassee, Florida. Elwood is a bright young black man, and he is on his way to school one day when he's picked up by a hitchhiker and ultimately falsely accused of car theft and sent to the Nickel Academy. The Nickel Academy is based on the real-life reformatory known as the Dozier School for Boys that was open for about 100 years and only just closed in 2011 after an investigation into unmarked graves, unexplained deaths, terrible neglect, and abuse. I had never heard of the Dozier School for Boys until I read The Reformatory by Tananarive Due, which happens to be one of my all-time favorite books. So anyways, Elwood gets sent to this academy, and Elwood has more of an idealistic point of view. He wants to clear his name. He believes that if he just does everything right, he'll just serve his time and get out and life will be just fine. And he views the world kind of similarly. If he just does all the right things, all the good things will come to him as well. In the Nickel Academy, he meets and befriends another student there named Turner. Turner is a little bit more cynical about life, and he believes that the key to survival in the Nickel Academy is to do anything and everything, regardless of ethics and morals, that is the only way you can make it out of the academy alive. The bulk of the story is the friendship between Turner and Elwood. The story is told in a dual timeline, and it's being told by Elwood in the future, sometime in the 70s, where he's living, working, involved in a relationship, relatively happy life, and he's kind of telling his story of his time in the Nickel Academy. I think I would have enjoyed the actual reading process of this book, and I mentioned this in my previous review, had I not read the Reformatory first, because the Reformatory was just, it was just one of those books that was brilliantly written. Of course, it was the one that opened my eyes to the existence of the Dozier School and what happened in that place. As I was reading The Nickel Boys, I didn't feel like there was anything that was new to offer me in reading the story. So the bulk of the story is the friendship between Elwood and Turner and just their trying to get by and get out of the Nickel Academy. Until the end. The end was a big punch in the gut. It has also one of the best twists I've ever read in a book that I absolutely did not see coming. And I'm not a rereader of books, but this is one of those books that I kind of want to reread because you look at it with fresh eyes and maybe you might pick up on some things. that you didn't the first time around because of that twist. That ending, I mean, I still think about it to this day. That ending, it definitely elevated the book for me, and it just made me rethink some things. If you are curious about the Dozier School for Boys, I mean, obviously you can just go ahead and Wikipedia it. I think there's a couple of documentaries out there. I highly recommend both of these books. If you are a little bit weak-stomached when it comes to abuse of children, I would go with the Nickel Boys. Either way, they're both fantastic books. And this, man, I loved this book. The reading process wasn't one where I thought, oh, this is going to be a favorite of mine. It was the ending that really elevated this book, and it absolutely made reading it worth it. And finally, my absolute favorite of all 5 of these, the one and only 5-star read from the last 3 months, is Where the Rivers Merge by Mary Alice Monroe. Mary Alice Monroe is a pretty prolific writer, I believe, and this is the first book that I've read by her. It won't be the last. I only picked this up because there'd been a lot of chatter about it in the book community, and I am so glad I not only found this book, but this author, because now I have a whole nother backlist that I have at my fingertips. This book took me by surprise. This is literary fiction, historical fiction as well, and you're following the main character, Eliza, who I think goes by Lizzie, and this is told in dual timelines. And you're following Eliza from 1908 as a young, I believe, 8-year-old, as she is raised on this plantation known as Mayfield. And this is in the Ace Basin of South Carolina, I believe. And Ace stands for 3 different names of rivers: a large, undeveloped wetland, estuary ecosystem in South Carolina. And so that's where Lizzie grew up. And she grew up a total tomboy, just hanging out with her older brother, Haywood, I believe, and her best friend, Covey, who is the daughter of the plantation's foreman. Lizzie and her family are white. The foreman of the plantation and, of course, Covey are black. And Lizzie's parents, her dad is a little bit more progressive, but her mother is very, very uptight as far as following the societal norms, and, you know, everybody has their place, and it kind of rubs her the wrong way how close Lizzie and Covey are. And so it talks a lot about that and just them growing up and the different expectations that society has of each of them separately, the opportunities that each of them have that are very, very different. And so it follows Lizzie as she grows up on her beloved Mayfield. Then we have present day Lizzie, and she is the head of, she's the trustee of the conservation for the land that Mayfield is on. And her one and only son, grown son, believes that when Lizzie retires or dies, that trust is going to be left to him, and he is chomping at the bit for it because he wants to develop that land. And Lizzie knows that, and it will be over her dead body, and if she has her way, not even then that will happen. So Lizzie finds herself in a conversation with her granddaughter, her son's daughter, Savannah, and her grandniece, who also happens to be the granddaughter of her best friend, Covey. Lizzie wants to tell them the story behind Mayfield and maybe get them to understand why it's super important that it is preserved. So that's the setup of the novel. I listened to this and it was brilliantly narrated, absolutely elevated the story with the narration. She got the characters and that Southern drawl absolutely perfect. Mary Alice Monroe is very, very invested in nature conservation, and it shows in her writing. It really, truly makes the reader care about nature and wildlife and the conservation of it all. And she just does a really, really beautiful job of that. The dialogue between the characters was very engaging. I probably had it done in 3 days. I really, really couldn't put it down. I will give you a warning. This is the one criticism I had. This is the first in a duology, and nothing is resolved in this first book. So when I realized I only had 10% left and nothing's resolved. I'm like, is this going to be one of those books that just kind of wraps it up really quickly? No, because it's not wrapped up. It won't be wrapped up until the next book comes out. And you're not given any clue that this is a first in a duology, because normally, like, you know how you look on Goodreads and you can see in parentheses the such and such series, book number 1. This didn't have that. And at the time that I finished this book and realized it was a first in a duology, I went to look up to see what the name of the second book was. Wasn't even on Goodreads. So yeah, I was a little annoyed at that. I'm not bummed that I'm going to need to read the second book. I just like to be prepared if I'm going to be reading another book. So I am very much looking forward to the second in this duology. I feel like it's going to be another favorite, but this one, absolutely beautifully written. There's everything that you could possibly want in a literary historical fiction. You have love, you have romance, you have heartache, you have war, you have death, you have friendships made, you have friendships destroyed, all of the drama. I can't recommend this enough. Absolutely loved it. All of the stars. So that is it. Those were my 5 favorites from the third quarter of the year. Have you read any of these books? What did you think about them? What books have been your favorites recently? I would love to know. I'm always up for recommendations. Please let me know, or just say hi down in the doodly-doo. Thank you so much for watching and for being here and continuing to support my channel. It really, really means more than you could possibly know. I love doing this for you guys and for all of you who enjoy it. I'm so glad. It makes me very happy. So thank you so much. And I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.